long-term relationships, they require a calmer, slower pace to actually build the trust, the reciprocity, the time spent together that actually leads to real friendships, real relationships. And what I see now is that they're not building friendships they can actually rely on.
Matthew, where does this podcast find you?
Los Angeles. I'm in Beverly Grove.
So let's talk about your new book, Love, Life, How to Raise Your Standards, Find Your Person, and Live Happily No Matter What. Can you walk us through what led you to write this?
I wrote this book. It's called Love, Life. I suppose I wrote it partly because I hadn't written a book in over 10 years. The last book I wrote was about 11 years ago, and it was a very different book. It was more kind of, I suppose, on some level on the strategic or tactical side of how to go out there and find someone. But this book really addressed some of the bigger reasons why we might struggle to do that, why all the advice in the world that relates to dating can fail us when there are just fundamental obstacles getting in our way, in either the way that our life is structured, in the mindset we bring to it, in frankly, the trauma we bring to the table when we go out there and date, the internal blockages, the continuing to go for what is familiar instead of what's actually going to make us happier. And so this book attempts to address those while also addressing the reality that life doesn't always go the way that we had hoped, and it often doesn't. And people find themselves single at a time in their lives they never assumed they would be single, never dreamt they would still have not found the kind of person or love that they'd been looking for, or come out of a second marriage at 65 and are going, oh my God, what happened? How am I finding myself alone right now? And for the people that had never been married and had never found that and are finding that they've spent their whole lives with a kind of chronic pain of loneliness, anxiety, sadness or depression around not having a fulfilling love life. So I wrote this book to deal with hard questions, really, and hard things that people go through, as much as the dream of finding what we want to find.
What do you think are some of the macro or the environmental factors that have resulted in, it seems like there is a crisis of loneliness, a lack of household formation, but in general, it feels like loneliness, especially men, but across both genders, is kind of for lack of a better term, epidemic levels. What are the atmospherics that have caused that, and what are some of the solutions or personal behaviors you would recommend?
So whatever issues people have with finding it harder to make friends the older they get, which I think is a real issue. I think that there are certain structures that we are kind of forced into at age. If people go to college, then you're forced into a social structure and you meet people, and every year after that, it tends to get harder for people. I mean, for some people it's easier, especially starting a new job is a chance at a new community, although it's still one related to your work, but it's still a chance to go, if you even work in a building anymore, it's a chance to go to a building where there are other people there and potentially meet people. But outside of starting new jobs, a lot of people I talk to don't have any forced structure where they're going to meet new people in this decade of their life, whether it's their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And so I think increasingly we have to have the proactivity and the impetus to engineer those structures ourselves. And that's a hard thing to do. One of the things I love that I heard you talk about, Scott, is just this idea that when you're talking about men, they're staying at home and they're not in the world. They're not building the robustness that comes from simply stepping outside their front door and being in teams, in groups, in situations where they can meet strangers. And I think that's true for a lot of women as well. Women typically, from everything I've ever seen, have empirically a much easier time staying connected to friends. And being part of social groups with their friends than guys do. But on both sides, it's so much easier to stay home now. And by the way, all the changes in dating and tech in dating have made that easier again, because at least dating finding love used to be a motivator in getting out of the house. And that might be something that forced us into situations where we had to meet with other people. But nowadays, you don't even have to leave the house for that. So human behavior is always going to trend towards what's most comfortable, what's the path of least resistance. And that's what people are able to do in dating as well as every other path I see these days. And dopamine, I think, also plays a huge role in the problems that people are experiencing, because the addiction that we have to our phones, the addiction that we have to constant hits of attention or novelty, and I'm not just talking about the areas where it's directly social, like getting people to like our Instagram posts or getting a match on Tinder, even just the dopamine cycle we're in of constant stimulation that has nothing to do with our social life, I think is a real problem for building relationships, because we're just wired these days for that kind of novelty and instant gratification. And friendships, attraction, long-term relationships, they require a calmer, slower pace to actually build the trust, the reciprocity, the time spent together that actually leads to real friendships, real relationships. And what I see now is that people have so many superficial connections, but they're not building friendships they can actually rely on. They're building a network of people they can show off to, but they're not building the relationships that when they're having a terrible time in life, when the shit really hits the fan and they need someone to talk to, they don't necessarily have an abundance of those people in their lives. And a lot of the ones they do have are unhealthy relationships. They're not supportive.
How has online dating impacted how people meet? Like, what's your view on online dating? And my sense is it's impacted men and women differently. What are your thoughts?
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Online dating has made it easier for people to get that dopamine hit that I was talking about, but it's made it harder for many people to get to the point of actually getting to know someone, actually having any real moment of social interaction. The number of people I speak to that get locked into cycles of speaking to someone for weeks or months where it's just a texting dynamic. There's no moment, how many people never even get to the point of a date with someone that they are seeing in an online environment. And I say seeing in quotes, because the real danger I see with so many people, and I see this time and again, is we are not present with the reality of our actual lives and relationships, especially in our love lives. We are more concerned with the fantasy of what could be. Online dating gives us ample kind of fodder for those stories without necessarily training us to be disciplined and ruthless about actually focusing on people that present as real prospects. And I see people waste years or even decades of their life on those stories. And time is ticking. The whole time we're spending 6 months in a quote situationship with someone who's not progressing. That's 6 months you'll never get back. So that I see that a lot on the women's side. I'm curious to know what you are seeing on the men's side and how it presents differently.
Well, with men, so women have a much finer filter than men, and also there's more men on these apps. So what this all distills down to is that a man of average attractiveness on an app has to swipe right 200 times to get one match. And so for men who are kind of in the bottom 90, online dating is pretty humiliating. And so you have this kind of Portia polygamy effect online where the top 10% of men get an abundance of opportunity and the bottom 90 get almost none. And so it feels like women are all kind of pursuing the same guy. And those guys who get an abundance of attention, it doesn't incentivize them to behave well. And then the bottom 90 are just very frustrated and upset and start, going to dark places. You said something that struck me in your book, and I really like this. You said we have to be wary of the instinct to transfer the importance we feel for the position we are looking to fill to a new person who only might one day fill it. And I was thinking about my own personal experience with dating, and that is whenever I've become a little too obsessed is the wrong word because it's never taken over my life, but infatuated with someone, it wasn't about that person. It was about where I was in my life at that moment, that I wanted something that was going to take me away. And I envisioned this new life because I wasn't enjoying my current life. And the prospect of this person or being in a relationship with this person filled that vessel, that opportunity to do something differently. Anyways, say more about what you meant here.
Well, I love what you just said. I think when we're trying to derive our source from something or someone else, then we can't afford to lose it. And I do think the more we find ways to create that source from within, or even just from more diverse external sources, so that in the book I get people to kind of, as an exercise, draw what I call an identity matrix of all of the different things that make up the identity they've constructed for themselves. And I know on a mindfulness level that would be seen as just all being a problem because any kind of identity we take from anywhere makes us vulnerable, and of course that's true, but that doesn't mean it isn't wise to diversify the sources of confidence and identity in our lives. And that's why for people who have hobbies that they love, or creative endeavors that they derive purpose from, or careers that they derive an enormous amount of satisfaction from, or friends and family relationships, they are diversifying the sources of their confidence, and that's a very powerful thing. Now, romantically, there's always going to be this incredible draw to that square in our identity matrix, and for so many people, I would argue universally, whatever form it comes in, we are looking for love. We want that feeling of having a mate. We want that feeling of being attractive to the people we're trying to attract. We want to feel fulfilled in our love lives. So that desire to find that becomes so, in some cases, anxiously driven, especially when time is running out, or it feels like time is running out. That's true on a very literal level for everyone who's looking for a family of their own biologically, and for women more than men, although for men too, more than a lot of them realize. That fear of time running out amplifies this feeling of, God, I have this really important position that I want to fill in my life. I'm trying to fill the position of my life partner. And we get so obsessed with how important it is to fill that position that the moment we go on a date and we see even the faintest hope that this person could represent a candidate for that position, which, by the way, Scott, normally is not based on any deeper character traits, because how many of people's deeper character traits can we really ascertain on a 1 hour first date? Usually it's based on the fact that they were charming, or they were charismatic, or they kind of, swept us off our feet a little bit, or, they made us feel really good about ourselves in that hour, or they were sexy, or they had the body shape we're attracted to. We see those things and our brain kind of lights up and goes, oh, this could be it. This could be that person. And all of a sudden, in this very subtle but insidious move, all of the importance of the role we're trying to fill suddenly gets shifted over to this person sitting across the dinner table from us. And then, a week in, we're wondering, why am I obsessed? How I'm obsessed with this person. And cognitive dissonance, I think, makes us tell a story about why we're obsessed. Like, no, I'm obsessed because I really do feel an amazing connection with this person. I haven't felt this in a long time. And we try to tell ourselves a rational story about why this person we just met is instantly so important to us. But the reality, I think, is one we have to confront in order to actually let the air out of that balloon in a healthy way, which is that I do not know this person. All I know is their impact at this stage. I don't know their character. Much as in a job interview, I don't know about you, Scott. I've been humbled by, I've always thought I'm an incredible judge of character. I really am. I'm great at judging character. And then, I hire someone for a role because in the first hour, I thought this person's incredible. They're going to do wonders for our company. And then 6 months later, I'm humbled by how wrong I was.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell.
And so the idea of, I know this person from this first hour is just, it's an arrogance a lot of us have. The truth is, character is consistent, and consistency can only be measured over time.
We'll be right back. If you could give men and women, or maybe it's different for each, of kind of one or two best practices or behavioral modifications that would increase the likelihood they might end up in a healthy relationship, what are those one or two things?
I think, firstly, set your path before you go out there into dating, because otherwise you're going to be swept away by whatever is the shiniest thing, not by someone that's actually aligned with your values, not that someone presents as someone who's going to make your life better now and in the future. We've all seen men and women attracted to sex appeal, charm, charisma in a violent way where that just becomes everything to get that person and secure that person without ever really assessing, am I really going to want the thing that I'm working hard to get? And there are plenty of marriages that people end up in where they find that, I got the person. Now what does my life look like with this person? And it's like that actually becomes a secondary question in the equation. And it should be the primary question before all of the chemicals kick in that make us suddenly run headfirst into a situation that brings us an enormous amount of pain and suffering, and sometimes are very hard to extricate ourselves from, especially when our life becomes enmeshed with a person like that. So first, decide what is valuable to me. And one of the ways to decide that is looking backwards. Most people, myself included, can look at a relationship where they overvalued the wrong thing and undervalued the right thing. And as a result, were miserable. I remember a relationship where I was trying desperately to hold on and to keep this situation, this person. And yet it was making me miserable. And I was terrified that if I lost it, I would be in hell. But the truth is, I was already in hell by being in it. I was just telling myself that if I could just secure it, then I'll be okay. I'll be happy. And I was missing something fundamental, teamwork, loyalty, trust, a feeling that I mattered, a feeling that I was seen, that there was equal investment on both sides. I didn't have those things. And so I was an anxious wreck in that relationship. I was like a version of me that I look back on now and I cringe. I'm like, oh my God, that really brought out the worst in me in every way. So when we look backwards, we can often see a relationship where we were told ourselves it was important to us, and yet we were missing something crucial. And by missing that crucial thing, it became hell. If we remember those situations and the ingredient we were missing that made us miserable, well, it stands to reason that ingredient should be the number one priority going forward. And yes, we still want attraction. Yes, we still want some chemistry. Yes, we still want some of those things that light us up. But importantly, if we find those things, but we don't have that ingredient, we don't bother. Because we know when we had all those things last time around, but we didn't have that ingredient, we could not find a way to be happy. We were just in constant suffering, and we should not wish that on our future selves. So that's one big important thing. I do think we have to look practically at the areas where our ego is maybe driving us too much instead of our happiness. Often we want the person who we can bring to our friends and family, and everyone's going to pat us on the back and celebrate us and tell us we did great. But usually that's based on a lot of superficial things, or, the way that person walks in and charms everyone. It's often not based on the deeper things that make us really happy. So I think we really have to tune into what's going to make me happy, and what's going to bring me peace, what's going to bring me calm, what's going to bring me a better life, not who do I bring to my friends and family and everyone says, you did great. Or we show a picture and everyone's like, oh, good job, buddy. Like that's us being driven by ego. So I think we have to be very careful if we're being driven by what egoically satisfies us or what actually makes us happy on a deeper level. And also look for areas where you're addicted to a certain feeling that you keep telling yourself is happiness, or you keep telling yourself is like the great stuff when romantically, when actually it's just a feeling you've become addicted to over time. And you can find examples of this in different places in your life. I remember the realization that when I was late to things, I would get annoyed at myself when I would show up late. And I would go, why am I late? Like, there was no reason for me to be late today. Why am I late to this thing? And part of it I realized was, I'm addicted to the feeling of rushing somewhere. Like, there's something adrenaline seeking about leaving a little too late and then having to get there on time, and all that frantic energy is something that I was used to. I was used to chaos in my life. So I would, even if I was on time, unconsciously, I would always find a way to engineer needing to then rush at the last minute. And so it took me away from calm, because calm to me presented as kind of boring. Getting somewhere 5 minutes early and then just sitting with my thoughts, that was like boring and uncomfortable, whereas rushing to get there was adrenaline. And so you could apply that to any relationship in your life. And so I would invite people. I don't think this is an easy process. It's certainly not a simple process or even an intuitive process, but I would invite people into the process of looking at feelings you keep chasing that really don't serve you. Going on Instagram and scrolling for a few minutes will give you a feeling, but 99 times out of 100, nothing about visiting Instagram is going to serve you. So what's the feeling we're chasing? And do we need to start chasing feelings and experiences that create a better quality of life for us? And that's a harder question, and it might take us some time to even calm our nervous system down from the feelings we're used to. If you take a drug addict and, the day they quit, you sit them in front of a sunset and ask them to appreciate a sunset. That's going to be a difficult moment for them to take in the beauty of a sunset. But months or years later, they may truly have the ability to sit there and go, wow, this is amazing. But my body needed to, physiologically, there needed to be a period of kind of detoxing from that old experience in order to truly appreciate a new one. And so for some people, the answer might be stop dating for a while and detox from that. For some people, it might be have a real sit with yourself and start to write down, what do I value now? And let me be wary that the old feeling is still going to be exciting to me, and I'm still going to feel the drug of that. And that's the dangerous part. And I have to respect the drug. I have to respect what it does to me, but I have to train my focus to the kinds of people and relationships that make my life better, not worse.
Matthew Hussey is a leading dating expert and confidence coach. He's also a podcast host and the New York Times bestselling author of Love Life, How to Raise Your Standards, Find Your Person, and Live Happily No Matter What. He joins us from his home in Los Angeles. Matthew, I enjoyed the conversation, and good luck with the book.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the conversation. I hope you'll come join us on ours sometime.